Trying to look taller? Classic wingless behavior. Always obsessed with height.
We need to talk about Mistfall Hunters, because honestly, despite being arguably terrible at this game, it has me hook, line, and sinker as of late, and I feel a need to share why with all of you. To roll back briefly, in case some of you don't already know what Mistfall Hunters is, it's a dark gothic extraction looter game, pretty much like if you cram Dark and Darker together with Elden Ring. At the time of recording, I've played around 18 to 20 hours or so, with it being pretty equally split between solo and then a mixture of duos and trios, in trio only, matchmaking mind you. And with all that said, I would consider myself a fairly casual player, so as I talk at you about my latest obsession, keep in mind you're listening to a gamer who panic spams skills and forgets to use the handy dodge button pretty consistently. So I won't spend too much time in this category today, but performance and visuals is something that needs brought up. So aesthetically, I really like it. The textures are crisp and detailed, the general art direction has a strong dark gothic and almost magical druidic feel to it, to which I'm really enjoying. Though I can see where people could think that it's a bit bland or feels like something that they've seen before. Performance, on the other hand, we're going to be a little more critical about. So the first couple of days or so of release, performance was abysmal. And I know, what game in the modern era doesn't have major issues on launch, but even though I expect it at this point, I'm going to call it out when I see it, especially when it is massive stutters and negative frames per second all the way around. Obviously, that made playing the game an absolute chore. I even had to take a break for the first day or two and wait for it to kind of get fixed. Now, at the time of recording the gameplay you'll be seeing today, which would have been about mid-late August, the performance has greatly improved. But I do find it odd that my 5070 Ti is only getting 80 to 90 FPS in 1440p with a mixture of epic and high settings. Normally, I tend to get a solid 120 frames in almost any game, so it still feels a bit lacking. And reading through some Steam reviews, at least, for PC, it does seem like there is still people having large performance issues and things like rubber banding. So it's hard for me specifically to say how bad it is in general, as I don't have too many issues. It definitely needs mentioned, but I'm not going to condemn the whole game over it, as it does seem like they've put in the work to make it overall much better performing than right at launch. Extraction and looting. Now let's talk about two of the biggest features of the extraction genre: the act of extracting, looting, and itemization. Unfortunately, I find the act of extracting itself to be very annoying and a bit more tedious and input heavy than it needs to be. A brief explanation is, first you need to find a tree branch that is set on a timer, much like Dark and Darker if you've played that one. After you activate the branch, it sends out a little ghostly mist orb thing you follow. Now once that settles into the ground in a random spot you have to chase, there's a short timer for that, and then a little bell dude pops out of the ground, and you must do your best to make sure he regrets ever seeing the light of day above ground. And once you defeat him, a little tree pops up, which must be interacted with for a short time, before one more interact button press lets you actually get whisked away to the hub. See what I mean about it being a touch input heavy? I will admit that it is something I have gotten used to over the course of playing, but I would really prefer it to be slightly streamlined. It's just a little cumbersome and just, well, like I said, it's a little input heavy. There's a lot of steps you gotta take just to stand in the extract and leave. So I would love to see that tuned back and made just a little bit simpler, at least in my humble opinion. But now let's get to the good stuff, which is talking about loot. And it is one of the main reasons that I have been hooked on Mistfall lately. It's not a terribly complex system. You have your rarities, from your gray, very common items to overly expensive and necessary for hideout upgrade gold items. Now obviously, Having gold items in your pack, turning a corner, and seeing a hostile team in front of you while you're on your way to extract is a backside clenching and all too familiar feeling for those of us that dip our toes in the extraction genre. But something I've come to appreciate in Mistfall is the usefulness of a lot of basic and mid-grade materials. A lot of the hub's passive upgrades and a lot of gear crafting does use more than just the rarest and brightest items in the game, meaning that finding 4 copper buttons in one run and suddenly being able to complete 2 different base upgrades at once was a very satisfying experience, even though on paper I didn't find anything particularly valuable. On the flip side, there is an entire auction house system that is seamlessly built into base upgrades. So, missing that same copper button, just autofill and use your currency to buy it and upgrade on the spot. So farm for items you need or sell items on the market for currency and buy the upgrades. The path is yours to choose, and that's something I really enjoy. Gear and accessories is the natural second part to talking about loot, and an aspect of this game that has also impressed me so far. Gear upgrades from your weapon to your accessories almost always end up feeling impactful with a few niche contradictions. For example, I felt substantially stronger having mostly green and blue items compared to mostly gray and green items, which is, natural, you're upgrading. But even with feeling those power spikes, at least in my lower level of play, it never feels like the gear makes PvP enemies unbeatable, as I've 1v1 people with way better gear than me and won the fight. Though talking about this branches a bit into gameplay rather than strictly talking about loot, this makes it feel to me like getting better in your chosen class and learning the game and its mechanics is as or maybe more important than just the gear you have equipped, which is something I really appreciate. I like gear, I like getting power spikes, it's awesome to feel stronger, but it's also important that it's not so important to have just the absolute best gear that you don't stand a chance against someone who has it, or no one stands a chance against you. It needs a little bit of balancing. So now we're going to roll into talking about combat and the classes, which is something you'll be spending a fair amount of your gameplay time doing. So let's talk about it. The groundwork of combat is just a general third-person action game divided into multiple classes that all have a basic chain of attacks, and then several abilities that either have a cooldown or some class-specific form of limiting the use of a skill, whether it's a generating resource, something in that manner. As you level up your character, you'll unlock different skills that can be swapped out between rounds. This does add some variety and a feel of creating your own build to an extent, which is something I, at least, have not seen much within the extraction genre and find really engaging, simple as it is in this game. The leveling and locking has also been fun, as it adds a sense of long-term progression, making a failed extract not feel like a complete waste of time as you still get your XP towards your next level up, which is really cool. Overall, I do find the combat to be fun. Most abilities and attacks have decent feedback and look cool enough to be fun, without being over the top and creating a mass amount of screen clutter. Timing your dodges and skill uses to outplay an opponent is a very satisfying experience because when you play well, you really feel rewarded for your skill. Now, there are a few things I do find frustrating, and I must mention. And the first is the lack of a lock-on feature. It turns most skills with any movement to them from a cool gap-closing attack into a camera-guided missile that often leave you jumping past the target you're trying to fight, which makes some fights, especially in a group, very, very messy at times. Now, I know there's a lot to be said about this being a skill issue, and I do 100% agree with you, but I feel like we could probably all agree that there are some edges to combat that could definitely use a little bit of sanding down just to create a more fun combat system across all skill levels. Class balancing is also a bit of an issue that I can't just move past without speaking on, at least a little. So it's no secret, if you've read any reviews on this game, that people find a couple of classes, especially the Shadow Strix, which is ultimately just a rogue, to be wildly overpowered. Now, At my more casual level of play, I have only found this to make fights a bit of an uphill battle, but ultimately I have won a good portion of my fights against the quote-unquote overpowered classes. But at higher levels of play and with a lot more gear and, just a lot more skilled players, I can see that little uphill battle turning into a complete mountain climb. So if for some crazy chance someone over at Bellring Games sees this, maybe look over the trends of class choice among the top players and use that as a guide in doing just a bit of tweaking to the class balance. Another big thing I would love to see addressed is the lack of party options. Currently there are only 2 maps, which is fine, they're great maps, but one can be played solo and trio, which is really obnoxious as a often duo player because you either run around solo, which solo mode is great, I love it, but playing with just a buddy, I either have to autofill with a random or we 2-man it, which 2-manning it is fun and is possible. We've done it in tons of rounds, but you are at a big disadvantage not having that third person. So it'd be really nice to see an actual duos mode added to the game. And it just feels a little restrictive because the second map cannot even be played solo and only has trio. So you either solo queue into it, sneak around, and really hope you don't get jumped by one of the trio death squads playing on the map currently, or you join in with some randoms and really just hope that you get people that want to work together, which is probably about 50% of the time. So it's a little challenging. It would just be nice to see a little more options as far as the party sizes. So in a little conclusion, overall, I'm having a great time playing Mistfall Hunters, and I look forward to playing more and seeing all that this new addition to the extraction genre has in store for me. And I sincerely hope that the devs keep on improving and adding to their game, as even though it has some rough spots and sharp corners, the heart and core of it is very strong and leaves them with a great foundation to keep improving and moving forward with, and I'd love to see that happen. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the rambling about my latest obsession, consider dropping a like and subscribing to show me you'd like more videos in this style. And let me know in the comments how you feel about Mistfall, good or negative. I'm just curious what everyone is feeling about this game. As a big fan of the extraction genre, you don't see a lot of variation outside of these shooters, so it was just cool to try out, and I'd like to know what you guys think. But anyways, so long for now, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.